Primary research includes any research that you yourself conduct. It's original research, in another word. What constitutes original primary research differs based on what field you're in. For example, a marine biologist may do primary research by measuring the populations of shrimp in different parts of the Gulf. A historian may conduct primary research by collecting letters written during World War I. For our class, and in most business-related fields, we will be doing primary research that involves people. Since people are different than shrimp or letters, you need to keep certain ethical standards in mind when doing primary research with human subjects. It wasn't always this way, though. It wasn't until after the Nazi war crimes were exposed at Nuremberg that explicit ethical expectations were established for scientific researchers. It wasn't enough to say that research would benefit future generations. Any benefits had to be weighed against what the participants went through. Later, you had to make sure that your participants knew what they were getting into when they were involved in a study. You couldn't, for example, tell people that they were being treated for bad blood and then let them suffer from syphilis for 40 years. But what does this have to do with you? You aren't injecting anyone with anything. You're just asking them questions. Even some questions can create risks or suffering. For example, if you're doing research about what kind of products gay Muslim men buy, they might be at risk by revealing their sexuality to you. Similarly, asking someone who has gone through a traumatic event to describe it in great detail in order to get information about their hospital experience may invoke the same terrifying emotions that they first felt when they went through that trauma. In this presentation, I'm including pictures of my friends and family because everyone you do research with is someone's friend or family. Just to keep you reminded that the people that you do research with are real people. That's why, if you plan on presenting or publishing your research from here in the university, you'll have to fill out an IRB request. This review board will make sure you're being ethical to your participants. They will make sure you aren't doing anything immoral under the university's name. And they will make sure you are especially careful with special populations, like children or others who might feel pressure to respond in a certain way. For our class, you aren't publishing and presenting this work, so you don't need to submit to an IRB. But I am asking you to be ethical. Make sure your participants know why you're including them in your study, that they can decline to participate at any time, including after the study, and that they have your contact information in case they have questions or concerns in general. Just be nice to them. Treat them in the way you want to be treated. And speaking of which, I'm in this picture. Can you find me? Surveys, focus groups, there are lots of ways to engage in human subject research in business writing, but we're going to focus on interviews for this project. There are a couple of reasons for that. First, surveys really work best if you can survey a large enough group for your population. So if you wanted to survey business majors here at the university, you might be able to get a representative sample. It would be much, much harder, though, to make sure you got a good-sized sample of, for example, all accountants. Focus groups are great, too. They're like big group interviews that invite participants to add input that the researchers might not have thought of, or they might ask participants to complete activities together, like word association. Focus groups are great in business. You might have seen those car commercials that represent focus groups in action. They're the commercials with a group of pretty/ordinary people who are described as real people, not actors. And then they get asked to describe their perfect car. Then they do something dramatic, like remove a wall and oh my gosh, it's their cars. It's a little more theatrical than most focus groups, but you get the idea. The reason why we aren't doing focus groups in this class is it can be hard to get people together at one time in one room in a short period of time. But if you major in marketing, it is quite possible that you will conduct focus groups of your customers. We, however, are going to focus on interviews. When you choose someone in your industry to interview, you're going to do some background research very first thing. For example, if you're interviewing your aunt in HR, you might look up the company website where she works to find out more about her company. You're also going to prepare a script with questions you want to ask. We'll talk more about that later. But right now, it's just important to note that you aren't going to wing it in an interview. That wastes everyone's time. You can ask follow-up questions or questions that aren't on your script, but you don't want to have a lot of, what else? In your interviews. You will also schedule with your participant. Set up where, when, and how to meet. Maybe you plan on calling your aunt at 7 p.m. Sunday, and you're going to be the one to call her first. Also, let your participant know what they're getting into. Will the interview take around 10 minutes or an hour? If you go long, you can always reschedule, but respect their time. During the interview, you'll want a copy of your script so you remember what to say. You also might want to record the interview on your phone, after you get permission, of course. You can also take notes by hand. If you want, you could have one person in your group conduct the interview, while another person takes notes of any particularly interesting points. The interviewee may have insights beyond the questions that you prepared, so be sure to ask them if there's anything else they'd like to add, or if there's more about any of the questions you asked. After the interview, you can go through your notes, looking for relevant patterns. For example, maybe email came up several times, both in interacting within the company and with clients. You can also decide to repeat an interview, perhaps because there are additional questions you'd like to ask or because you ran out of time. Always check with your participant about whether and when they want to continue the conversation. We're conducting an interview as a requirement for a class, but you want to make sure that you make the best use of your time and the time of your interviewee. To make the most of your interview questions, consider these strategies. First, make good use of your research. Instead of asking questions that you could easily find on the internet, use your research to lead to other questions. Instead of asking how long they've been in HR, for example, ask, I notice you've been working in HR for Boeing for 30 years. What's changed over your time there? Also, make sure to open up the conversation with open-ended questions. Instead of asking a one-word or yes or no question, like, do you prefer to write email or talk on the phone? Ask them when they use these strategies and why. Finally, make sure that each question is relevant to the interview. If you asked them if you could interview them about business writing, it would be inappropriate to ask questions unrelated to business writing. Not only do irrelevant questions waste your time, but they could also catch your interviewee unawares, especially if such questions are personal or private. My old mentor at BYU, Christine Hansen, interviewed a wide variety of professionals about the writing they do in their jobs and in their personal lives. The result, the Write for Your Life documentary, is a great example of exactly what we're looking for in this assignment. Here's a short transcription of the question Christine asked. Instead of asking, do you write email, she asked, what sort of documents do you write? This kind of question led the interviewee, engineer Jeffrey Germain, to give a wide, open-ended answer with lots of details, not just confirming that he does write email, but also about the technical papers and reports he writes. I highly recommend checking out the link in the slide for more examples of good interviews. Here's the Jeffrey Germain interview in action.
I write a variety of things. I write emails. I write technical publications that are disseminated through engineering outlets. I also write reports for my clients that are filed with various organizations, specifically courts around the country. We are asked to analyze motor vehicle accidents, and in connection with that, we are asked to write reports often. And those reports then summarize our work, provide our opinions, and that document becomes something that is required by a court often in the work that we do as a part of the litigation process that is occurring.
Consider these great examples as you work on your group project about industries or professions and the way that they write. Good luck!